Our lesson of scripture this morning comes to us from Matthew's Gospel. This morning I'll be reading from chapter 12, verses 43 through 45. Hear now the reading of God's holy word. When the unclean spirit has gone out of a person, it wanders through waterless regions looking for a resting place, but it finds none. Then it says, I will return to my house from which I came. When it comes, it finds it empty, swept, and put in order. Then it goes and brings along 7 other spirits more evil than itself, and they enter and live there. And the last state of that person is worse than the first. So it will be also with this evil generation. This is the word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God.
I want us to think this morning about emptiness in our lives and all the things that we do to fill empty spaces. Empty space is going to be filled with something. Empty time gets filled with activity. Empty space gets filled with stuff. I've told the story several times, I guess, in our 7 years together about my father's mental breakdown. In short form, here it is. My middle elementary years, my dad had a severe emotional breakdown. He had served 2 really difficult churches in a row. There were some great people in both of those churches, but there were also a number of people in both of those churches who behaved horribly to him and to one another. My dad was one of the most serious-minded, conscientious people I have ever known in my life. And some people can laugh it off. That was not in his ability. It was too much for him. One morning, he just disappeared. By afternoon, it was apparent that he was missing. Highway Patrol was called. And around dark, they found him sitting in the old 48 Plymouth up on a road just outside of Sparta, North Carolina. It was where he had served one of his first churches, and there was a place up there that he would go and sit when he needed to think things through. This particular day, he had it, and he had gone to that place up on the mountain basically just to shut down. They brought him home up in the evening. My brother and I shared the same room. My brother was asleep. They put him to bed. Well, they put me to bed too, but I wasn't about to go to sleep. I knew something was up, and so I made it a point to stay awake. And when they came back in the house with him, they let me out to see him. And what I saw constituted one of the really formative moments of my life. At first, middle elementary, it's the glint of lights off of badges and pistols that gets your attention when the highway patrolman brought him back into the house. And then I fixed my gaze on what really got my notice. It was my father's face. Never seen anything like it before. I had never seen a living person who was not at home in the body that they were supposed to be inhabiting. His body was there, but the part of him that made him who he was, that was missing. Now, I was pretty young and I didn't know what was going on, but I know when something's missing, and something big time was missing. And ever since that night, I have instinctively understood that of all the perils there are in life to watch out for, that emptiness is one of them. Tucked away in those few verses that Mike just read, in the 12th chapter of Matthew, are Jesus painting a picture of a man with an evil spirit who had in his home. He gets rid of it. The man tidies up his house a little bit, but he doesn't replace the evil spirit with anything else. So the evil spirit being cast out, goes roaming around, finds nothing to do, gets bored, and decides to go back to the house that he got tossed out of, just to see. And he discovers it's mostly empty. So what does he do? He goes back out and he finds 7 more demons, worse than himself. And he brings them home with him. And the man who got rid of the one demon and replaced it with nothing winds up worse than he ever had been. Who's the culprit? What's the critical condition that invites the disaster? Well, emptiness is the culprit, and a vacuum of the soul is the condition that invites the disaster. A family leaves home for the weekend, long weekend away. They have one teenage child who has things going on. They leave the child there at the house, we'll say by himself, and the house is empty, and he invites all his friends over on Saturday evening for a memorable night. Empty buildings, empty warehouses have to be secure, or people will go into them and set up housekeeping. The old mill out on the 4-lane burned down because it was empty and bad spirits moved in. And that's what happened. There are people who have vacation homes all over Swain, Jackson, Haywood County, who are wherever they live, thinking about their empty house up in the mountains. Only not all of them who think their house is empty are right about that. There are people who see an empty house as a magnet, and they will move in, and they may live for weeks or months before somebody spots them. There's some space in our lives that's more physical, and some that's more spiritual. But both of those kinds of space can wind up empty, and it will get filled with something. Physical space. You've got a 42-inch TV. Used to be considered a big screen TV, and you've made do with it till somebody in your family gets a 60-inch TV, and it just kills you that you don't have one. You're missing out on something. So you go and get one and find a space that's big enough to hold it. Consider this. What have you accomplished? You have accomplished being able to watch your favorite team lose on a screen this wide, which may be worse than having to sit and watch them lose on a screen this wide. You decide your telephone is not quite up to date, and you need to get one with more bells and whistles to better enable you to take advantage of social media. So what's the benefit of that? Sometimes people will put their foot in the mouth on social media, post a video that probably they shouldn't have, text something that probably they shouldn't have, and what does their new phone with all the bells and whistles do? It disseminates their embarrassment, their self-embarrassment, faster and further than the old phone ever would have. And that's supposed to be a good thing. Fellow has a pack of hunting dogs. It's very adequate. Somebody offers him the buy of a lifetime, the most wonderful dog that ever was, pedigreed, blue blood, wonderful hunting dog. Cannot turn it down. Doesn't need it, gotta have it, gets it. You got one more dog to be rounded up on a nasty, cold winter night. People, us, we use pets to fill some of the empty places in our lives. Dogs are the number one choice. There are, however, people who even try to fill some of the voids in their life with cats. We won't go there this morning. The Declaration of Independence says we have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The pursuit of happiness is what gets us. Too much of the pursuit of happiness involves filling time with activity and space with stuff, both of which very often don't live up to the expectations we have or live up to the hype of whoever's promoting adding this to your life as the key to your happiness. But we push right ahead and we fill our lives with stuff, thinking that if we are careful and pick the right stuff, that will truly make us happy. Hoarders are the extreme example of using stuff to make you satisfied. And does it make a hoarder happy? Pick one of any of the programs that feature hoarders. There are a number of them out there. And just watch one episode with the sole purpose of focusing on the star of the show, who is the hoarder, and counting the number of times you see that person smile during the course of the show. It doesn't happen very much at all. Let's think for a few minutes about the spiritual space in our lives. I like to think of spiritual space as emotional space, the part of our life where we feel. And this gets into the area of our life that we talk about when we think about our soul. So the spiritual side of us, the emotional side of us, the soul side of us. I use that interchangeably. We fill that space mostly with people. That's a good choice for that space. And there is often for many of us a person whom we describe as our soulmate. What's a soulmate? A soulmate is someone who knows you better than anybody else, who can know what you're thinking without having to ask you what you're thinking. We fill that part of our lives not only with our soulmate, but with all sorts of people, family, friends, significant others, children. Those are all good choices to put in that space, because people aren't stuff. People are in a different category. They're way better than stuff, because people are of God, created in God's image. God made Adam, stepped back, looked at the whole situation, and said, that's good, but what's not so good is Adam is alone. I need more people so they can all have each other. And God did. And God And God created us, and here we are. If good things are going to happen in our lives, the most important place for them to happen is in that emotional space where we fit people, that pulls people close in to what we consider our soul to be. Sometimes we let the people in our lives be so satisfactory and fulfilling to us that we let them, to a certain point, take the place that rightly belongs to God. It's a blessing to have good people, and people that love us, and people that we can love back. And they can fill up a lot of the emotional space of our lives, and that's very important. But there is a certain amount of space that if God is not in it, then there is a certain emptiness that no number of wonderful persons in our lives can replace. There is some space in our soul that only God can adequately fill. Anything less, at some point, is going to turn out to be a Band-Aid that's applied to the soul. If you got a hole that is empty, what good does it do to put a Band-Aid over it? All you do is cover the opening. You don't put anything in the empty space that's there. You fill an empty space in the soul with God and nobody else. The empty place, if God is not in it, will keep us from finding the most fulfillment in life. If God is there, then everything else has a way of working together, because if God is in His place within us, all the other things can be put in their proper place, as opposed to sometimes the way we operate, putting all the other things in our life in an elevated place that they do not deserve. This morning, think about that part of you that's soul, where you fit the people in your lives who are really important to you and who make it worthwhile getting up every morning. If you have someone you think of as your soulmate, they fit into that space. The question to ask is, when you think of God, do you think of God as a soulmate in the same way you do the person you call your soulmate? If you have someone, you say, that's my soulmate, what it means is you're like this. There's no distance between you. You read each other's minds. You're just together for the duration. And there's no distance between you. We can be close to God. But when we get close to God, close is either this or it's this. And if we're close, but there's still space in there between us and God, it is space that will get filled by something. And it's space that we need to close to make our relationship with the God who created us and the Jesus who died for us complete. That's not something to leave to chance. What I invite you to do this morning in a busy life is to step back and think about where God is in relation to you. If He's like this with you, or if it's more like this, and there's still some space to be covered between the two of you. Is you walk with Christ as close as you think it is. What's the reality of it? That's something that every so often we need to consider. Happiness that lasts. Fulfillment that satisfies us for more than a short period of time is to be found only when all the empty places in our hearts and souls are filled with God. The other things can be good, can be blessings. Without God in His place, they will not work as well together as we had planned.